Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat, along with IrishBreakdown.com. I am Vince D'Addario, and I am solo at the moment. We have a shortened sprint to the finish type show again today. It is a Thursday. It is January, so that means there is women's basketball for Notre Dame at 6 o'clock. So less than an hour from now, you will have tip-off for Notre Dame women's basketball. And that means pregame is at 5:45, which means we are out of here at 5:40. Okay, so this is a literal sprint to the finish line. You've got 35 minutes of myself and hopefully Trevor Trowbridge, if he can break away from the big show over on Irish Breakdown's YouTube channel, that he is supposed to join me today. And we are planning to talk about the transfer portal. And of course, Notre Dame got another commitment today from the transfer portal. And Trevor is going to come in and talk about that one. And we'll talk about the portal class as a whole, since it's probably about done. But Notre Dame did get a transfer signee today. Oregon defensive tackle Tion Gray, 6'6", 336 pounds. That's going to be a fun one. He is going to be able to patrol the middle of this defense. We all know that defensive tackle was one of the big positions of need for the Notre Dame football team in the transfer portal. And of course, everyone was, worried, and the gnawing and gnashing of teeth and the biting of fingernails and everything else as day after day seemed to go by, and Notre Dame wasn't getting anybody. And then you had the flurry of activity where they got a bunch of guys, and all of a sudden the Oregon defensive tackle comes in, visits Notre Dame for a day, and now he's part of the class. And so Notre Dame just continues to get better, and that is a very exciting piece for Notre Dame football. So when Trevor has an opportunity to join me, we will jump into that portal conversation and talk about Mr. Gray, as well as the rest of the portal class, what that means for Notre Dame. Did they check off everything that they were looking for? Are all the boxes checked? I think they are. I think they not only checked all the boxes of need that they had, but they also went above and beyond and brought in a couple of corners that I was not anticipating. And they needed one wide receiver in the portal, and they got two wide receivers in the portal. And they didn't just get a wide receiver in the portal, they got 2 5-stars in the portal. And I think that's a very exciting piece for this roster and what things are going to look like in the spring. Because look, I don't know that anybody that Notre Dame is necessarily an anointed starter for this team. Maybe there are. Maybe there was some talks, behind closed doors that, if you come over here, you're going to be a starter, et cetera, et cetera. But what I do think is going to happen is I think that Notre Dame had a really good roster to begin with. And it was a situation for me where everybody in that first week of the transfer portal being open, Notre Dame is not bringing in these game changers and, all of these different things. I still am on the team of Notre Dame had game changers on the roster already. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't have holes that they needed to fill and all of that type of thing, but I do believe that Notre Dame has playmakers on this roster. And then you look at who they now have brought in the portal, and now you've got some serious competition at a lot of positions, which I think is very exciting as well. I mean, you're going to have competition for the cornerback position. I don't think anybody's going to be unseating Leonard Moore anytime soon. But I do think Gray is going to have some competition at the field corner, and that's okay. I mean, he's a 3-year starter out there. and he's going to have competition. Okay, cool. I'm down with that. Could he move into the nickel spot? It's possible. I also think that Dallas Golden is going to be a very, very good nickel for Notre Dame this year as well. But you brought in two guys that have a ton of experience. I mean, the kid from Michigan started every single game, last year from Michigan as a true freshman. He's got talent. So there's going to be, because they did need, I guess, some numbers in the corner room because some guys that were lower on the depth chart decided to take off in the transfer portal, which is fine. So they needed to bring in some numbers. They didn't just bring in numbers. They brought in guys that are going to compete for playing time. Awesome. It's that whole iron sharpens iron situation for me. And I think that just makes your team better. And then you flip over to the wide receiver position and you got, they brought in two former 5-star wide receivers from Ohio State that still have a bunch of eligibility left and a ton of talent. You just raise the ceiling of that wide receiver room. No questions asked, right? You've got stalwarts that you kind of know what they bring to the table, and Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse, and there's still question marks about about Jaden Greathouse, considering we saw what he did in the playoffs last year, and now all of a sudden he didn't play in the end of the last season because they were waiting for the playoffs, right? And so, what is Jaden Greathouse going to bring to the table? What is that going to look like, right? And so you got two guys that we know, and then you got two guys that we don't, and then a bunch of depth at wide receiver. So competition, here it comes, right? So I think this is an exciting time for Notre Dame football. We tried to warn you not to get too worried about what was going on in the transfer portal, and here we are with a ton of competition at multiple positions for Notre Dame going into the spring and going into the fall. And with that said, let's welcome in Trevor Trowbridge from IrishBreakdown.com. Trevor, I appreciate you coming and hanging out with us today for our sprint to the finish line. Hope everything went all right over in the buy, sell, hold big show.
Yeah, it was good, man. We were ripping through some good buy, sell, hold submissions, but I'm here in IB Nation Sports Beat and ready to talk more transfer portal stuff, bro.
Yeah, man. So the news of the day, obviously, let's just jump right into it. I kind of touched on it at the top here, and I'm sure I'm butchering his name, so if I get it wrong, please let me know. But Tion Gray, defensive tackle from Oregon, was visiting Notre Dame yesterday, and then he commits today, or at least it made it official today. 6'6", 336 pounds. Trevor, let's just talk about him specifically right now. What does he bring to the table for Notre Dame? How does this change what Coach Ash wants to do on the defensive side of the football, whether it's the run game, the pass game, all of those different things? How is this commitment? How does this change Notre Dame's roster?
Well, first and foremost, Vince, spoken like you named him yourself. Tion Gray is exactly correct.
Yes.
So well done, sir. Well done. But in terms of what it does for Notre Dame's defensive line room, look, man, we talk a lot about diversity of talent. And what was some of the issues that Notre Dame faced in 2025? When they faced certain types of offensive lines, I'll use the season opener against Miami, for example. When that interior of the defensive line had to face Miami's interior that had Anez Cooper, who was 6'6", 340 pounds, they didn't have a counter. Now, mind you, one of their attempted counters was asking Donovan Heinisch, all 6'2", 277 pounds of him, to go nose up on him.
Right.
That was the incorrect strategy in the first place. I would have went with 6'5", 322 Gabe Rubio. But now you're in a spot where you can counter what other teams want to do. That's what really elite teams with elite levels of depth are able to do. They're able to look and see what you do on the offensive side of the ball and say, hey, we have a counter for every specific situation. That's what Notre Dame's cornerback room is able to do. That's what Notre Dame's defensive line is able to do. Heck, that's what they've been doing in the linebacker room the last couple of seasons. Hey, you're going up against a run-heavy team, you're going to see 34 and 27 lined up alongside of each other. You have teams that want to stretch the field a little bit more horizontally, you're going to see 3. You're going to still see 34 and 27. You're going to see more 4. So I think that's what this pickup of Tion Gray does for the defensive line room, and it's going to be really special, man. I'm excited to watch it go down.
Yeah, Notre Dame hasn't had this kind of beef, I think, in the middle in a while. Like you had mentioned, they had athletic guys, they had quick guys, they had guys that can still get after the quarterback and do it different ways. Everybody's been clamoring for the big body, right? Everybody's been clamoring because they see these SEC defensive lines. They see the beef that some of these guys bring to the table. And now Notre Dame has a little bit of beef. I think that can only be a good thing, right? I mean, and Notre Dame's still going to have those athletic guys in the middle, but then you bring in, 6'6", 336 or whatever he was. That's some serious. That's a big man. That's a lot of man that they're going to have to block, and it's going to keep guys hopefully off of those linebackers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, he's not somebody that put up top end level production when he was at Oregon. You go put on the film, and he was the plugger. He was somebody that paved the way for other players to run different stunts to do this. And so, what I think that this does is it basically puts a Mack truck in front of Drake Bowen, sending him right up Main Street on pass pressures. Notre Dame had one of the top rush defenses in the country last year. I think they finished the year ranked like 13th in yards. They finished in the season top 10 in rushing touchdowns allowed. But what Chris Ash did, what Marcus Freeman did, and Mike Martin and his staff that I appreciate is the fact that they looked at what they did and said, it was good, it needs to be great.
Yeah.
Or it was great, it needs to be elite. What pieces do we need to add to the defensive line to do this? And Tion Gray fits that mold, man. He really does.
Yeah. No, I think that's the mark of a team who wants to be a championship contender. It's the whole Marcus Freeman challenge everything mantra, right? I mean, he looks at it and said, okay, this is really good. It can be better. Let's address this need. Let's address this situation. He's done that, across the board, in my opinion. And we can kind of transition to the rest of this portal class. And I was talking about how, we'll get to the box checking here in a second, but to kind of piggyback off of what you were just saying about how they were good, but they could be better kind of a situation. I mean, look what they did in the cornerback room. They're good in the cornerback room. Like, you can just take what they did last year, take it to 26 and be like, yeah, we're good. But they went out and got 2 corners that are going to be competing for playing time. I mean, the cornerback room got better, right? I mean, they had to have with the 2 guys that they brought in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this does 2 things for the defensive back room. First and foremost, Mike Mickens, and if there's anything that we learned about him, that dude loves competition.
Yep.
And it would be very easy to look at Leonard Moore and Christian Gray and Dallas Golden, heck, even bring it back to the safeties, because we also know they kind of played positionless football back in the secondary.
Sure.
Also taking a look at Tay Johnson and Adon Schuler and Luke Talich, Mark Zachary, guys like that, people that we are expecting to be in the rotation. What this move tells me is like, yeah, you guys will be in the rotation if you earn it again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I think Mike Mickens sat down Leonard Moore and said, hey, you got to earn your spot in the rotation? No, I don't. He's the best cornerback in all of college football. I don't think he had that conversation with number 15. But what I think that does, it continues to elevate the room, and it also puts you in a spot where it solidifies your depth. What happens, God forbid, if Christian Gray goes down or if Leonard Moore goes down? You're relying on, most likely in the boundary, a true freshman in Kari Adams. If Christian Gray goes down, you put in Mark Zachary to the field, it's a little bit more manageable. But again, you want to put yourself in a spot where you have multiple answers. What this move also tells me is there's a chance, potentially, that everybody's positions may not be set. Who knows? I don't know what DJ McKinney's going to come in and play. The dude's 6'2". I don't know how much he's going to play in at corner or into the field. Or, oh boy, long day. Sorry, Vince. I don't know how much 6'2" DJ McKinney is going to play in the nickel. It's a pretty big nickel.
Sure.
You bring in a guy with experience like the Sanders kid from Michigan, Jaden Sanders. I don't know where he fits. Does he back up more in the boundary? Does he rotate in at nickel with Dallas Golden? I don't know. But basically what that did is it gave you a charcuterie board of options, and none of them are bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Ken throws a message in here. He says, do you guys think Christian might get beat out? 3-year starter. And I know this my first thought is no, but that doesn't mean that he's going to get the same amount of reps that he got last year. Number one. Number two, I also think this staff to a degree does value experience. I mean, that is a thing. Christian Gray has seen it all, right? The ups, the downs, all of it. He's seen it all. Could he get beat out? Sure. It's definitely possible. There's going to be competition. If you're asking me to predict it, I'm not there yet because I haven't seen these guys in a Notre Dame uniform playing with each other. And we probably won't get a really good view of that until fall camp and what are we going to be able to see at that point too? So, your guess is as good as mine. Is it possible? Sure, but I'm not ready to predict it yet.
No, I mean, again, like I said, unless your name is what, CJ Carr or Leonard Moore, anybody might get beat out. That I think
Right.
that more talks about the level of talent on this roster overall than it does about Christian Gray specifically,
Right.
or any one player specifically. Could he? I don't know, maybe. Who knows? Like, regression is a real thing in college sports. Now, do I think Christian Gray was going to regress? No, I don't. I just think he has to get healthy.
Sure.
I think, like I said, this is more for depth piece. Don't close the door on the options of people getting moved around. But to Vince's point, we're going to get a lot of light shed, middle of March when we go there for the first spring practice. We'll start to get an idea.
A little bit, depending on, who's in, who's out. They probably won't have the load management situation that they had last year because they were just coming off a national championship run, championship game run, I should say. And I mean, obviously this time last year, they were still having competitive practices getting ready for a game. So, and it felt like we took a nap and all of a sudden it was spring ball. So that is obviously different because the last competitive reps that they had were over Thanksgiving. So there's going to be a lot more time to rest and relax that I don't think they're going to have the load management that they had last spring. So I think we're going to see a lot more this spring than we saw last spring, which could be a good thing, especially with the competition that I think is going to be ongoing at a couple of different positions, one of which at wide receiver. And this was an interesting one for me, because Notre Dame went into the transfer portal window and everybody was on Nick Marsh coming out of Michigan State. He's the guy. He was up from Michigan. He knows CJ Carr. He's going to come to Notre Dame. He's always wanted to play with CJ. And the next thing you know, IU's like, not so fast, my friend. And they sign him, and the sky is falling if you're a Notre Dame fan. A week later, and then a week and a half later, Notre Dame signs 2 former 5-star wide receivers out of Ohio State with a bunch of years of eligibility left. First of all, I want to get your take on how surprised were you that those 2 guys are now in Notre Dame uniforms, number one. And number 2, what does that mean for this wide receiver room, moving forward?
I'm shocked. If I'm being honest, if I could just give an initial gut reaction, I'm very surprised that both came. Because look, in years past, Notre Dame's not getting those guys.
Nope.
They're not getting former 5-star guys that in high school just didn't give them the time of day. Milan Graham was at Irish Invasion. They recruited Quincy Porter out of high school, and Milan Graham knows Tay Johnson, and they were just like, yeah, you have fun at Notre Dame. And part of it, I understand why.
Sure.
I understand why Quincy Porter didn't give Notre Dame the time of day. It's like, hold on, I can go and be in a room with Jeremiah Smith and Brian Hartline, a team that just won the national championship, or I can be on a team that runs QB power 37 times a game.
Right.
I get the decision initially, but we talk about the CJ Carr effect. And you can sell it to recruits of like, hey, you're at this practice. Look what we're getting ready to do. But it's different on a national stage when Quincy Porter can turn on his TV and watch CJ Carr throwing a no-look touchdown pass to Micah Gilbert, a player that is going to play his position in this offense, and be like, oh, so that's what y'all are doing now. So very different. What it does for the receiver room, again, twofold. It elevates the ceiling. Like, the ceiling was already going to be high without either of those 2 guys coming into South Bend. I'm a firm believer in that. And that's not just with Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse. What that also shows me is that they're really buying into the development of younger players. They went out to the portal and got more younger guys. They brought in 2 wide receivers from Ohio State in the transfer portal, and Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison are still the oldest guys in the league. That's promising for me because I'm somebody who I've been somewhat critical of Mike Brown up to this point because it's like, hey, look, like, I don't put too much weight into what you did with Malachi Fields. You did a good job with Jordan Faison. I didn't love the management of Jaden Greathouse last year when he was healthy. What's going on with Cam Williams? What's happening with Micah Gilbert? Elijah Burris was a freak in the spring and can't find his way on the field once the season hits. But what that shows me is they're putting the trust in Mike Brown to develop the room that he has, and they added exceptional talent. I'm very excited for what Mike Brown can do with these guys.
100%. And, like you said, you're adding to a couple of guys that everybody knows and loves and I think can kind of project what they are capable of doing in this offense. And then you've got some question marks with some younger guys who we've seen some flashes. We've seen, the possibility, but they've been kind of buried or injury or whatever. And then you've got these two new guys coming in from Ohio State with all the accolades. I think that's going to be one of the more exciting situations at Notre Dame as far as from a competition level, because, if I was going to put you on the spot and say, okay, there's going to be a 6-man rotation at Notre Dame at wide receiver, who are you going with? Because this is one of the toughest questions I think that there is to answer right now.
I mean, if I just right now, and this is assuming that everybody stays and remains healthy,
Sure.
and that there's no more surprises really in the next, call it 30 hours of the portal still being open.
Right.
I would go in the boundary. My rotation's probably Quincy Porter, one of the transfers from Ohio State, and Micah Gilbert. In the slot, I would make the argument to move Jaden Greathouse out to the field, put Jordan Faison back in the slot, and then have him rotate with, probably one of Milan Graham or one of the freshmen or Logan Saldate. And then to the field, I have some sort of rotation with Jaden Greathouse, one of Milan Graham or Cam Williams. So similar to what we've seen in the secondary, Mike Denbrock has the opportunity to kind of play positionless football.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see as much of Malachi Fields as the boundary, and he's taking 99.9% of his snaps in the boundary. I think we're going to see that switched up this year.
Yeah, and I'm very interested to see what they do from a personnel standpoint as far as, okay, they didn't get a tight end in the portal, and I know there's some question marks at your favorite position on the field. Could there be times where the tight end is on the sideline and you either have 2 running backs or you have 4 wideouts, or, what could that possibly look like? I just think that there's a lot of options here with the personnel that Mike Denbrock has to work with.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for bringing up tight ends. It's been a couple of minutes since I've gotten to talk about them. I was starting to get itchy.
You're welcome.
But for the tight end, the interesting thing is the 3 guys that are seemingly, as of right now, assuming Cooper Flanagan is healthy, the 3 guys that are at the top of the rotation, their primary skill set is not as a pass catcher. Cooper Flanagan, Ty Washington, and James Flanagan. Now, that could change, right? I mean, Troy Nicholas was primary responsibilities in 2012 wasn't as a pass catcher, and he was pretty okay in 2013 when he became the guy. But some of your primary pass catchers, one won't be here until the summer with Ian Premer. Jack Larson has kind of been this conundrum of what do you do with him so far? And then Preston Frizzell is greatly going to benefit from being in the weight and nutrition program at the college level. I'll just say that. So very interested to see what they do with the tight ends.
Yeah.
This past year, we watched them a lot in pass protection. I'll be interested to see if they do that again and you remove a weapon from the field to protect CJ Carr, or they go out and run routes. Some of that's going to be dependent on the offensive line.
All right. Awesome. Well, we're going to jump into a break here real quick. The only one that we've got. We're going to jump into this break, and on the other side, we'll flip it over to the defensive side because I know there's some defensive tackles that you want to talk about, and then we'll talk about the class as a whole, and then we'll probably have to wrap it up because this is a sprint to the finish line, folks. So we're going to jump into the break. You are listening to Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat along with IrishBreakdown.com. Welcome back to Budweiser's weekday sports beat, along with IrishBreakdown.com. I'm Vince D'Addario. That guy over there is Trevor Trowbridge. And again, we are here for a very brief amount of time because Notre Dame women's basketball tips at the top of the hour. And here I am not doing my homework as to who Notre Dame plays tonight. I should know this. Let's see. I'm going to scroll down here. Louisville. Oh, number 9 Louisville invades Notre Dame here. So that's going to be a tough task for the Lady Irish, but you can hear it all right here on Sports Radio WSBT with Sean Stiers. Pregame show starts at 5:45, which means we have a hard out at 5:40. So it's a sprint to the finish line, but we've got some more portal talk to take care of here, Trev. And the biggest line item, I think, on the menu for Notre Dame and Mike Brown and Marcus Freeman in the transfer portal was defensive tackle. And obviously we already talked about Tion Gray today, but that's not the only guy that they were able, or only guys they were able to bring in. So what else did they do on the defensive line that shores up that position?
Arguably the biggest move, you don't even consider a transfer portal acquisition. It was more so, I like to call it an elongated retention of Armel Mukam.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And that him coming back is huge. And it's all for upside. You could argue that despite bringing in Tion Gray and bringing in Francis Brew, Armel Mukam might still have the highest ceiling of the players in Notre Dame's defensive tackle room. You needed somebody that has been a part of the program, that's already been a part of the Chris Ash defense. Now, he will be with a new defensive line coach, but Al Washington's still going to be the run game coordinator, so there's a lot of familiarity there. But you needed that to solidify some sort of a rotation. Vince, you and I talked about this last year on Irish Breakdown, that we believe that last year, instead of having like 2 guys, like a Riley Mills and a Howard Cross, Notre Dame's interior defensive line would just be able to come at you in waves and waves and waves. Well, up until really the last, what do you want to call it, 72 hours, it was kind of looking like they were going to come at you in waves, but it'd be waves of redshirt freshmen, true freshmen, and a former USC transfer in Elijah Hughes.
Yeah.
A couple sophomores sprinkled in there. Now you're at a spot where you can still come at people in waves, but those waves are now Armel Mukam, Francis Brew, Tion Gray, Elijah Hughes, Cole Mullins, Christopher Burgess if he makes the move inside. So getting Armel Mukam back was absolutely huge. Brian has talked about other stories on the Irish Breakdown podcast about how he's been at practices before he's heard stories of NFL scouts going to practice. People like, yo, who's that 88 guy?
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody like that is somebody Notre Dame needs on their roster. That's for sure. I mean, bringing him back was an absolutely huge move. And then bringing in Francis Brew from Pitt, he now leads your defensive tackle room in experience. He played 484 snaps this past season for Pitt. He gave Notre Dame some fits in the run game this past year, so their offensive line is familiar with him. Even Marcus Freeman talked about him in his press conference and was like, oh, what did I think of him? I saw him in person. You know, he's an exceptionally strong kid, strong hands. He's twitchy, and he made Feldman's freak list because the dude squats like 600 pounds or something dumb.
Child's play.
I was about to say, you've been doing that since birth. So
yeah, right.
He's got Francis Brew's got some catching up to do, man.
That's right. You know it. No, that's massive, though. I mean, solidifying the defensive tackle position, because we talk about it all the time. I mean, if you're going to be a successful championship level defense, you've got to be strong up the middle. Defensive tackle is obviously right there in the middle. They already got Drake Bowen, and they already have obviously a pretty solid safety tandem as well. So this solidifies that and takes this defense to another level. And, obviously the final spot that they really needed to go after in the transfer portal was kicker. They took care of that, bringing in Spencer Porath from Purdue. We're not going to spend a lot of time on him because really all he does is kick field goals and make them. So that's a good thing. Over 88% of his field goals last year. And like I said, he got a full ride to go to Purdue as the starter when he walked in the door. He's a very, very, very good kicker and should be the starter walking in the door at Notre Dame as well. And so that's a big pickup for Notre Dame. And I don't want to minimize his importance because it is massive, but he's also a special teamer. And, people start to glaze over when I pontificate about kickers and punters, and that's okay. And so let's look at this as a whole. Trev, here real quick. We got a few minutes left. Notre Dame had some very specific menu items that they needed to hit in this transfer portal season number one, did they hit those items? And number two, did they hit them in a way that is changing this roster for the better?
First and foremost, yes, they absolutely checked all the boxes of what they needed. Vince, what did they need? A boundary receiver, interior defensive lineman, and a kicker.
Check, check, check.
Absolutely. So we can clear that out. That is an A+ grade for filling the need. Does it improve the roster? I think that's a little bit more of a loaded question. It improves the overall ceiling. I really think that it does. But is there a world that Cam Williams ends up playing more snaps than Mylan Graham this year? Yeah, there's a world that happens. Is there a world where Micah Gilbert is the starting boundary receiver week 1 if he's healthy over Quincy Porter? Yeah. So just the overall level of talent on this overall roster is better because Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter and Francis Brew and Tion Gray, Jaden Higgins, and DJ McKinney are here. Could not agree more. But there's a world where out of the 8 transfer portal guys that you get, the 7 skilled guys, maybe like 2 of them start. There's a world where that happens.
I can see that. I could, and that just goes back to the point of there's a bunch of really good players on Notre Dame's roster prior to the transfer portal opening, and also including the 19 guys that jumped into the portal. Notre Dame had a bunch of talent on this roster already. So I agree with you. It could be 2-star. It could be 1. It could just be the kicker. And that's not even a guarantee because we know that Marty Biaggi likes Eric Schmidt as a kicker for some reason. So that's still a thing. So I just think it raises the competition level at every position that they recruited in the portal. It raises the competition level, right?
Yes, 100%. And I already can see it right now on the message boards at boards@irishbreakdown.com. I see it on Twitter. If that ends up being the scenario that plays out, and I'm not saying that it is, but if that ends up being the scenario that plays out, I already see the questions coming in of, did they miss in the portal? Did they not evaluate the right way? Did they not pan out? No. We've been telling you guys for months, arguably seasons, how talented this Notre Dame roster was.
Right.
One of the reasons why some of the other names in the transfer portal, and I don't want to be disrespectful and name individual people, but there's reasons why there were names that were fluttered in Notre Dame's direction. Like, what do you think of this pickup? It's like, you put him in the room, he's a Jag. He's just a guy.
Just a guy.
Like, that's what happens when you recruit at such a high level. So if that is the scenario that plays out in South Bend with some of these transfers, and do I think that's going to happen? No, but there's a world where that does happen, where 2 of the 7 or 8 end up starting. Doesn't mean that they missed. Doesn't mean that they're not going to play, because they will play. Believe me, they will play.
Yeah.
Barring injury. But look, man, it just goes to speak of how talented this roster truly is.
Yeah. Now, one of the line items that a lot of people going into the transfer portal really thought that Notre Dame needed to have was going out and finding a backup quarterback. Mm-hmm. We got a couple minutes left. I just wanted to touch on this briefly. You know, they kind of, kicked the tires on a couple of guys. I think they brought one in, that kind of a thing. They ended up not bringing in a backup quarterback to this point. There's still time, obviously. You don't, just because the transfer portal window closes doesn't mean they can't bring in guys down the road. Do you think right now that that's a miss? Or do you think that there's, they're going to have 4 quarterbacks on the roster. Do you think there's a backup quarterback, a viable version of a backup quarterback that if, God forbid, something happens to CJ Carr, they're going to be okay in that regard? Did they miss here or is everything fine?
Quick rapid fire answer. No, I don't think that they missed. I understand the argument of, what if you need the backup? It's like, well, first of all, there's no quarterback in the portal that's going to be able to replace CJ Carr. Right. And you never know what Hebert's going to do as a backup until you give him the opportunity to be a backup. You recruited him for a reason. Stick with the young kid. Yeah.
And there's going to be really good competition, I think, between those 3 guys over the next year plus.
Yep.
And so that's going to be a lot of fun to keep an eye on for sure. Because I do think there's a bunch of talent in that room. It's just a bunch of inexperienced talent, right? And so we'll see what happens. Shockingly enough, that's going to do it for this edition of Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Stay tuned for Notre Dame women's basketball as they take on number 9 Louisville and Sean Stiers at the mic. Have a great night, everybody.